I'm always buying with the mindset of, can I make a profit on this? I'm not going to buy something that I'm overpaying for and I'm not going to make a profit. When I bought, I was like, okay, the biggest drawback is this isn't producing any cash right now in the moment. However, my wife and I, we can afford the payment. It's not a significant payment. If we do get in a pinch where we're like, man, money's tight, something happen, I don't know, I can't predict the future, we do have the insurance of falling back on our rentals. I don't want to do that, but if that worst case scenario is that, or you sell it. But for me, when I bought my farm, I looked at it as, I hope it hunts really good. I think it will. I know I can improve the land and put in sweat equity and make it better. But worst case scenario, by doing land improvements, I can turn a profit.
Jeremy, good morning. Welcome to the Land Podcast. How you doing?
I'm good, man. It is a beautiful Tuesday, July 1st morning here in northern Wisconsin, so I can't complain, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I've been, this is really fun for me because I was on your guys' podcast. I think it was earlier this year, I think.
Yeah, I think it was back in January.
Yeah, I remember. But it had to be early January. And you were asking questions about just what I've learned from doing the Land Podcast, being a licensed real estate agent. And you were in the middle of gathering intel to buy your first farm, and you sent me a text a couple weeks ago like, hey dude, I'm in the process of buying my first farm, and I was so jacked for you. So I wanted to get you back, or I guess I wanted to get you on the Land Podcast to hear all about it. So thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, dude, my pleasure. I'm excited for this conversation. I think you and I have the same passion for real estate, and I think it'll be a good conversation.
Yeah, so what was your introduction into real estate, and what made you, because you have some rental properties, right? And
Yeah.
so rental properties versus buying land, I feel a lot of guys probably fall into that battle of figuring out what makes more sense. I'm sure you've pondered that question. So what's your answer?
Yeah, so I was very blessed with one of my best friends as a real estate agent here in Wisconsin, Minnesota area, and I knew he was an agent, obviously, and I had done transactions through him, but I really never dove into the rental side of things, owning rental properties and different buildings and assets and all that. And I think once my wife and I we bought our first house when I was 21, and then I kind of we sold that. The market was starting to just kind of get hot during those hot periods of low interest rates, and people, were going 30 to 100,000 over asking prices, where kind of the sky was the limit. We were lucky enough to find our house here in Wisconsin before that kind of hit off. So we didn't really have any, competing offers and whatnot. So we kind of got established there. And then once, we started to build some equity and stuff, I started to talk to my good buddy, and he kind of opened my eyes to real estate. And I remember the one thing we talked about, I'm a fireman. I work full-time as a fireman, and we have a 457 plan. It's kind of similar to like a 401k. And that was kind of what we were taught, growing up. When you get in the fire service, every old salty guy comes up to you and says, hey, whatever money you have left over, throw it in your 457. You'll be a millionaire by the time you retire. At the time, it's like, oh, well, that's great financial advice. I'm going to do that because this guy's getting ready to retire, and he's been around the block, Yeah. And luckily for me, my buddy he was an agent, but he was also a firefighter for a brief period of time. So he was kind of in the same, I don't want to say retirement fund, but planning for retirement was the same concept, 457. And I remember asking him, I said, Steve, would you put more money into real estate or the 457? And I was very naive, again, because that's what I was taught. Put all your money into 457. And he goes, let me ask you a question. How much money did you make off of your first house, which was back when I was 21? We lived there for roughly a little over 2 years. And I said, well, I made about $40,000. And he said, okay, how much did you put into it? And I said, well, I got it for, I think I put 3% down on a first time home buyer. And so roughly it was probably about $10,000 with closing. So I said, I put 10 grand down, and I really did nothing to the house other than maybe paint a couple rooms. So nothing crazy. And he said, okay, do you see where I'm going here? And I said, the light bulb clicked. I said, oh, a lot of sense. I put down a payment, and I got that back plus $40,000 in 2 years, which outperforms anything in the stock market. Obviously, you have your crazy stocks like the period of Dogecoin and all this crazy stuff. But,
Yeah.
that's not considerable. So when he told me that, it kind of made a light bulb go off. And I was like, okay, I want to get into real estate. I also want to keep kind of my stock stuff going on. I'm not really educated in stocks. I kind of pick the safe ones, your S&P 500s and all that. And I just do automatic payments and, set and forget. But I wanted multiple streams coming down the mountain as far as assets go. So we kind of were in a spot where, hey, we had some equity and we decided to take out a HELOC against our house, so a home equity line of credit. And we used that for a down payment on a duplex back in I think it was 2024, like right at the beginning. And it was going really well the first 6 months, and we had enough saved and little left over on our HELOC where we bought a second one. And all the numbers made sense. Before you do that, you got to run all the numbers, make sure your HELOC payment is getting paid for, plus you're cash flowing a little bit per month to make sure that you have leftover money for any repairs that needed or, service calls, whatever it may be. And then also building up your reserve fund just in case, like something happens, you have a set amount of money. Like for me personally, I like to stay between about $10,000 to $15,000 per unit, which is more than enough adequately, I would say, other than something major like a roof repair or something like that. But going into your, when you're buying that, you should consider that, if it needs a new roof, you're going to have to come up with, $10,000 to $20,000 depending on what size of house and all that. So that was kind of my jump in. I knew I wanted to be a landowner one day. However, I had hunted public land my entire life. I have a few good spots that, are decent. I know it pretty good. I go out west a lot and hunt public out there. And so I'm like, one day we'll get there one day. But right now we need to establish a base where we're producing income. We have a separate hand of assets, but we also have our retirement through work and all that. So my wife and I did that for about 2 years. We're able to build up a reserve fund per se. But also during that, we were picking up shifts at work, working overtimes. I'm in the military as well, so I receive a re-enlistment bonus that I've been saving over the years. Nothing crazy. I think it was like a $15,000 bonus that gets paid over like 6 years. So you're making like, $2,000 a year. But I saved that, and we were just able to save up over time. And eventually, we're like, okay, our rental gig is doing pretty well. Obviously it's not all rainbows and unicorns. There's service calls, maintenance needs to be done. Furnaces go out when it's minus 30. You just deal with it, And so finally we got in a position where, hey, we have enough cash saved for a down payment on a piece of land. We ran the numbers. Obviously everybody knows right now, as of July 1st, 2025, interest rates aren't the greatest. They aren't ideal. They aren't what they used to be. However, for me personally, as a investor, myself, I don't let rates bother me. I don't let them scare me away. I think if the deal is good enough and it makes sense to you, I think you should buy it. I don't think you should wait. And that's kind of what we did with our rentals because, as soon as that
you bought them in 20.
Rate,
you bought them in 24 too. There's a lot of people started buying 21, 22, or 20 even, but 24, there's less activity for stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we just, it made sense to us. We always run numbers, and I'm not, bigger pockets or anything like that where I have all these spreadsheets. I literally go on Google, I type in a mortgage calculator, I add my interest rate in, my property taxes, my insurance, and I figure out that rough number. And from there, I run our what we can get for rent, what we have left over. And if it makes sense, we buy. And we did the same with land. So it just created, I think, getting the rentals established first. I think it was for our situation, it made more sense for us to have more income coming in that way, just in case we did find a really good deal on more acreage than what we were maybe comfortable with paying, and we could offset that payment with our rentals. That wasn't our goal, though. I don't like stealing from my assets to pay for another asset. However, some people do. I like just to keep building that up so I can buy more with that money available. But that's kind of that's kind of how I got into real estate through a mentor of mine, and it really opened up my eyes when we first had that conversation of like, hey man,
you got into it by accident.
Yeah, exactly. And I just didn't think it was attainable for me. I'm like, my buddy does really well in real estate. He's one of the top agents around here, serving, over, I'd say, 2 to 300,000 people, um, in the greater area of northern Wisconsin, Minnesota. But yeah, man, I just didn't think it was attainable. And once, you kind of dive down the different avenues to obtain funding and different ways you're eligible for, uh, and creating a good relationship with a lender, the sky's the limit.
What's your long-term plan with so you have 4 doors right now?
I
To
have 4 doors. Yep.
okay. What's your long-term plan with those? Is that another form of retirement, or what's the motivation to wanna have to, handle tenants? Because I think that's something a lot of people try to figure out.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
worth it for them?
for sure. For me, it is. I just basically look at it as another asset down the road. Like the sooner I can get those paid off, obviously the more money it generates, but it just allows me more freedom. It allows me more leverage down the road, with those rentals. But the way I see it is like I still contribute to a 457 and then a private, just an independent like Roth IRA. I have something through the military as well, and I'm in a different scenario too, where most people don't have pensions anymore unless you're in public service of some sort or like a teacher or whatever it may be. But I do have, my pension through the fire department, which, you know, should be, if it stays the same, it should be pretty good, but that's in 25 years. I have no idea. So that's a factor of like, okay, what if this goes away or drops significantly? What's my plan? Am I going to rely on, hopefully becoming a millionaire through the stock market? Maybe could pan out, but I know for a fact real estate does not depreciate. It's always appreciating over time, right? And arguably, some years, I would say on average, it will outperform the stock market. But, I think that's debatable. I'm not a financial advisor. So this is
Yeah.
no,
This is not financial advice.
so, yeah. So I see it that way. It's like, okay, if I can get those paid off by the time I retire and, hopefully have a couple more doors by the time I'm 50, 55. And then, if we want to, hey, boogie down to Iowa, like that's our plan is I want to retire in Iowa. I want to move down there and buy a farm. And right now, Iowa does not tax pensions. So that's kind of where I want to end up. It all depends on what happens with the state, in 25 years with the deer plans and all that. So that's kind of my plan. And then if I want to cash out, sell my rental, I pay the man, Uncle Sam, and then go buy a house, or I take that money, the earnings, and buy a farm, whatever it may be. But yeah,
Mhm.
basically my mindset is just to have multiple streams of revenue coming down that mountain and not have my eggs all in one basket, which is why I like to be diversified with, being a landlord, having a few rentals, but also having land too.
I like it. Now,
Mm.
would you say land fell more in the recreation category or investment category for
Uh,
how you the piece you found and how you ran the numbers?
both, I would say. The biggest drawback for me was, when you own rentals and you get paid every month on the first, you're taking in money. Somebody's paying for that rental and you're making a little extra, hopefully, in a perfect scenario. However, when you're buying land, typically now obviously there's ways to produce revenue off of land, tillable, timber harvest. Maybe there's a house on the piece of land. That was kind of my goal. Was like, man, if I could find a place with a little shack or like a, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, something I could rent out and offset the payment a little bit, ideal. However, you know, for me up here, I mean, it's going to cost me more than my mortgage on my personal house. And it just didn't make sense. The numbers didn't make sense to me. So, um, when I bought, I was like, okay, the biggest drawback is this isn't producing any cash right now in the moment. However, my wife and we can afford the payment. It's not a significant payment. And, if we do get in a pinch where we're like, man, money's tight, something happened, I don't know, I can't predict the future. We do have the insurance of falling back on our rentals.
Mhm.
I don't want to do that, but if that, worst case scenario is that, or you sell it. But for me, when I bought my farm, I looked at it as I hope it hunts really good. I think it will. I know I can improve the land and put in sweat equity and make it better. But worst case scenario, by doing land improvements, because it's raw land. Obviously, raw land is going to sell for less than improved land. I can turn a profit. I don't plan on holding this farm for my whole life. However, it could hunt really well, and maybe I do hold it and just buy something else. The future is hard to predict, but that's kind of where I sit. I'm always buying with the mindset of, can I make a profit on this? I'm not going to buy something that I'm overpaying for and I'm not going to make a profit, just because that's just how my mind is operated, I guess.
Do you think, well, talk a little bit about your shopping process. How many farms did you walk? And at what period of time did you say, okay, I think I have enough money. I'm ready to buy a farm. How long was that period of time?
Yeah. I think I seriously started looking in the beginning of 2024. So my daughter was born in February, and we kind of went through, that stage of life, first time parents. Hey, we don't know what this is going to cost, blah, blah, blah. Let's kind of get a couple months under us. And then once that happened, we rolled into summer, and I looked at my first farm was actually down in Buffalo County, Wisconsin. I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard of it. It's a kind of the old mecca of whitetail hunting, arguably one of the best counties in the country. I would disagree with that now, but I did look at a farm down there. It was 20 acres. It looked really cool on a map. It looked phenomenal. And then you get there and realize that, okay, yeah, you probably have a chance at a 140, 150 every year cruising through, but
Mhm.
access was horrible. There was only one way in, one way out. And it was $15,000 an acre. So
Did it?
not ideal.
Did that piece sell? Did you watch to see if that farm sold?
Sold for 10,000 an acre, as far as I know. But yeah, it took probably about 8 months. I think it was kind of on and off. It
Hmm.
did sell. It's a cool piece, man. Just not. I mean, that's almost 3 hours from my house, so it's not ideal. I have no access to water or anything down there. I'd have to go to a gas station, fill up. I have no lodging. There's just a lot of things that kind of you don't think of. You're kind of naive to when you first start looking. You just kind of look at the property as a whole, like, oh my gosh, this looks amazing. You're down on the drift list, the bluff country, everything's green, farms, soils are great. The deer hunting is pretty good, but not 10,000, $15,000 an acre good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I knew I wasn't going to be able to flip that. I'm like, if this thing is barely selling for 200,000 for 20 acres, I mean, I know it's not going to sell for 15 anytime soon. I mean, that's a proven fact, unless, then maybe the neighbor really, really wants that 20 acres. But,
They had 8
so
months to decide, yeah, if
yeah,
they wanted it or not.
yeah, just fate's not in your hand, man. So I walked that. It was cool. It's pretty much everything you think of when you think of the Midwest. But obviously I walked away from that. I had no intentions of buying. I wanted to walk it to actually throw a lowball offer in to see, kind of get the negotiating started. But I never did. I was just like, you know what, this isn't ideal. It's not realistic for me. It's not a good deal. So I walked from that. I looked at another farm because I was already down there. I looked at a 25 acre, 30 acre piece, um, and had zero interest in that right away. When I rolled up, I was, yeah, not ideal. There's a road kind of splitting the property right down the middle of driveway. So I wasn't too fond on that. And then I just kind of started looking around the greater Wisconsin area. It wasn't until this summer where or actually it was this spring, I did a really big rip down to almost the Iowa border, the Iowa Wisconsin border. And I looked at a piece down there. I scouted some public, and then I scouted my way back up home. And it was a full day trip. It was 4.5 ish hours down. And then I scouted for probably another 2 to 3 hours. And then I drove home. And that trip made me realize, like, man, if I'm going to drive that far, think if I just did a day rip and I just wanted to go spray plots, how much little of work I'd gotten and how much drive time I would have.
Yeah.
Plus the factor of, okay, there's no lodging. So now I have to either camp, which is fine. I don't mind camping in the summertime. But when it gets October, November, December, I'm not camping, not because I am soft, but it's, you never warm up. Like if you're going to be
Yeah.
outside the entire time, you're never going to warm up. So you're going to buy an Airbnb, hotel, motel, whatever it may be, your minimum $100 a night. You go down and stay 5 nights, 4 nights, 5 days, plus gas, plus all your food. I mean, you're easily over $500 a trip every time you want to go hunt, and an 8-hour trip, round
Yeah.
trip. So I knew that it wasn't ideal. However, obviously the deer hunting's better in western Wisconsin, southwest Wisconsin. But I think there's still good deer hunting to be have in almost all states. And what really drew me back around the area I live is the wolf and the bear predators. It's just we're obviously overran with wolf populations, but that was kind of like what drew me back from buying them around here. And once I thought about it more and kind of networked with people around this greater area, I kind of made a radius on the map of I want to be about an hour. If I can be within an hour, an hour 20, whatever, that's ideal. I can get there, go do some chores, run home, be home for dinner, cook my family dinner. And I don't have to stay there. I can sleep in my own bed. So I started looking around and I just found a few places that I'd go walk and kind of like, this is a dud.
What
Not
would
really.
make you say that?
Um, Personally, I don't really care for some people really like it and that's cool. But for me personally, I am not a huge fan of being surrounded by public land. Um, some of them had small chunks, so like 40, 80 acres that I wasn't really fond of because I would put in all that hard work and I know people would hunt on top of my property lines. And the acreage I was looking at wasn't 2, 3, 4, 500 acres where I could hold deer. It was more like within 20 to about 100 acres. And that was a big turnoff for me. Access was a big turnoff for me. I like the diversity, like swampy land didn't really scare me away. I know some people are like, oh, I want big rolling oaks and open timber because it looks beautiful. But, I think if your timber's open, your timber sucks. But that's just my opinion. I'm no expert. I'm just a average Joe. But yeah, so I walked a few. Uh, some of them had a structure like a garage with a wood shed in it, or a wood stove with a shed on the backside. Some had driveways. Some were bare raw land. I probably looked at 5 to 8 farms, I guess, somewhere in there. Most of them were up here. A handful of them were, 2 to 4 hours from my house. And as I looked at those more and more, it really made my mind up like, okay, I don't really want to go down here and own land. Maybe one day where I could find something a little more higher in price where I can afford it and we get there one day. But for now, I'm just rolling with investment properties as far as like buying raw land, improving them, hunting them smart, saving all of that data. Because when I go out to these agents and I ask them, hey, do you have any deer history on this property? No, I have nothing, but I have a blind up on it. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's in a horrible spot. Which is fine because then I can negotiate and get it for a cheaper price. I wasn't really looking for a turnkey just because most I would say, and it's not a knock on hunters. I would like us to stay obviously united than divided, but most people, I would say in my region at least, you throw up a deer stand over a field, a hay field, or you throw up a blind where you can see the farthest and you hunt out of it. Access isn't really considered. And like, for instance, my property I bought had an awesome blind on it. It was the guy made it out of 2x4s and 4x4s, and it's an elevated blind, brand new, probably within a year or two built, but it's sitting over a field that you have to walk through the entire field to get to the blind, and the timber's on the back side. So I can't, if I want to put a food plot there, I have to move the blind or else I'm going to spook deer off the food plot, which is fine. Again, that's just all negotiating stuff that I can negotiate. Like the seller, for my instance, wanted to sell it for 2,000 more over my offer because he had $2,000 into the blind. And I said, well, you can come get it and just disassemble it and take it home. I don't want it because I'm going to have to move it. And it's a big blind. Like it's probably 15 to 18 feet in the air. It's a big blind. I got to get like a sky track or a big tractor with forks.
A big tractor with forks to get up that
Yeah.
high.
Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be a pain in the ass to move, but you know, I got it for my offer because I wasn't willing to move on that price because the blind was in such a bad spot. And I knew he wasn't going to come and get it and disassemble it and bring it home. Like,
It's a lot of work.
I mean, come on, like it's just, you got to stay strong on your guns. And that's just obviously comes with experience of buying properties and whatnot, and feeling out your buyer competition and whatnot.
Yeah. I will give a little defense to the world of real estate. A lot of times when we don't have deer history, it's guys that had hunted it previously and aren't going to share it, or
Yep.
B, no one's just ran cameras on it, or the owner was absentee and just like, you ask if
Yeah.
anyone hunted it last year, and they're like, we don't know.
And that's
That,
a lot where I'm at. Like a lot of guys either buy raw land and hunt it a couple times, or they don't run cameras. They go out during the 9-day gun season. They get up in the blind and they hunt mornings and evenings or all day, and that's it, which is totally fine. It's a little more reassuring. Like, okay, there is some deer history here or whatever, or if I see sign, but it definitely doesn't scare me because I think if you know deer habitat, what the deer like in your area, what's around your area as far as food goes and water and cover. I think you can transform your property and make it where you're hunting majority of the mature bucks on your property.
yeah. What on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say is the trophy quality for the neighborhood that you purchased your farm?
Um,
So it's obviously not Southern Iowa, but as far as that
I would
region,
say, I would say, for the area, I think it's better than where I actually live here. I call this my home farm. It's on 10 acres, very little improvements done. Food plots, water holes, basic stuff. But for that area, I'm gonna give it like a 5, maybe a 6. I think the expectation you should have for the area I bought is probably, I would say, 120 to 140 with your occasional 150, 160. There has been sightings of bigger deer in recent history. Years ago, somebody was driving on whatever road and saw, a 200-inch deer, but a lot of guys haven't ever seen a 200-inch deer. So you see a 180 and you're like, oh man, that's got to be 200,
yeah.
But yeah, I honestly, I don't have a lot of intel on my specific neighborhood within like a mile or two radius. I do work with two buddies of mine that own small acreage, um, probably about 4 to 5 miles as the crow flies, and every year they have a couple few decent bucks to go after. And that's just raw land. That's not, there's no food on it, no mock scrapes. It's just throwing up a stand and a camera on a well-known trail on their property, and they're hunting over it during the rut. So
Mhm.
I think there's potential, I guess, Jake, but there's not trophy quality that you would go to Iowa for. And you should know that living in the northern Wisconsin, Minnesota area. Sure, there's giants out there. There for sure that few people know of, but our deer are moving miles through the timber versus, you get in ag country, they might only have to move 500 yards.
Mhm. Yeah, that's okay, so let me ask you this question. So you have a buyer in your pocket for this farm 3 years from now. And
Yeah,
then an eightplex comes up, 8-unit apartment. And you can sell it and buy a bigger farm, or you can sell it and roll into 8 units. Well, what are you gonna do? They're both, and the new farm is, you know, a they're equally a great deal.
sure. Yeah, that's a hard question, Jake. If I'm being 100% honest, and both make sense, where I'm like the eightplex, I cash flow a lot, and the farm is a great deal, but I'm paying for it. I'm probably going to buy the eightplex and then buy a farm with that eightplex money.
Okay. Fair.
Personally,
Yeah.
just because where I know I can make money off of it, and I know whether it's a year or two, I can buy similar to that farm, or I can buy better because now I have more money in my pocket off of an eightplex. But it would be really, really hard to walk away from an ideal farm. Now, if you give me that scenario, if I live in Iowa versus northern Wisconsin, or even Wisconsin as a whole, I'm
Yeah.
probably take the farm in Iowa for sure.
Yeah.
If great deal, and I'm not losing a ton of money per month on it. Like as far as like I can afford that payment per month. Yeah, I'd probably take that farm for sure. But in my case, like up here, when you asked that, I thought of, northern Wisconsin or Wisconsin as a whole. If I can make a ton of money off an eightplex and take that money and buy a farm with it, I get 2 for 1, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah. What's your relationship with the debt load as well? I mean, is that um, obviously real estate? You can scale, 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 scale. Um, and so, what's your strategy of okay? This is like our personal goal is to keep our debt to income below this amount. Like, do you have a hard rule in your household?
Yeah, I mean, I look at debt as, do you have good debt or do you have bad debt? And I'm sure everyone has heard that before. Like good debt, something that's an asset, producing money, that's scaling over time, it's appreciating. Personally, I don't have like all of my personal money with my wife and I, where we get paid from our companies we work for and goes into our bank account. None of that money goes into our real estate, like our personal duplexes that we own. All of it is produced by
Mm,
tenants for it.
hmm.
So that is my hard rule. As long as I am not paying for it and the numbers make sense, I will keep scaling. I always said like, dang, it would be crazy to have $1 million worth of debt. Well, I'm almost there. I'm like, which like might sound like, if somebody's listening, wow, man, that guy's an idiot. Well, it's all, I don't have student loans. I joined the military. I didn't go to college. Uh, I did go to, actually, I take that back. I do have a 2-year degree. God dang. Um, but yeah, I mean, my wife went to college. She got a 4-year degree. We have, I don't know, not that couple thousand maybe left on those student loans. But other than that, we don't have like, I don't have credit card debt. I don't have bad debt. I have short term debt. Like my wife has a car payment. It's short term. It's, I think, 3.5% on a 5-year loan. We pay that, whatever. It is what it is. I'd rather have cash available to buy other assets and pay this little dinky payment on this GMC terrain for the next 5 years, whatever. It makes her happy. But yeah, I don't have a lot of other bad debt per se, and I wouldn't even call like, would I tell somebody to go buy a new truck? No, absolutely not, especially today. But would I consider like a used vehicle, $20,000 you take out and your interest rate's 3% and you get a 5-year loan? I don't think that's necessarily horrible debt. I think you can outperform that in the stock market. I guess what I'm saying is like, would I suggest and again, I'm not a financial advisor, but would I suggest somebody could keep contributing to real estate, land, the stock market, rather than pay off their vehicle? I believe so, because I think over time your stock market numbers will outperform that 3% interest rate. But some people are also very Dave Ramsey and they just want to pay cash for everything, which is cool. To each their own. But to get back to I kind of got off track there, but to circle back, I don't have a hard number. No, I don't have once we hit $1 million in debt, we're done buying. We need to focus on paying it off. As long as it's producing income and paying down that principal and interest by somebody else, I'm cool with it. I'm just going to keep scaling.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't want to buy probably like 6 farms and I'm paying for it all out of my own pocket. Not ideal. But as long as my real estate is producing and I'm building up that reserve fund, my tenants are paying for the mortgage and it's taken care of and I'm not having to pull from my family's hard-earned money to dump into that, I'm fine with it. Good debt does not scare me.
How did you save up with your? How did you get your? We talked about it on the podcast a bunch, but getting that down payment for a lot of people is the hardest part.
Oh, it is.
How have you been able to get enough cash reserves to um, buy multifamilies, buy your first farm, diligently saving, or what? How'd you do it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll start off with, man, I'm not a trust fund baby. I'm not a millionaire. I am a fireman. I'm in the military as a guardsman. So, I go to drill once a month. I'm not active duty. And my wife's a nurse. And I do a couple little side gigs here and there for my buddies that are in real estate. I'll go pound signs, or I'll go look at a house, whether it's like, somebody's got a leaky pipe, whatever, little
Like
jobs. Like,
handyman, like handyman
yeah,
stuff.
I'm not that handy, but like little stuff where it's like, it's worth my buddy paying me $100 to go put a couple signs in than him waste his time doing it, where he can, be with clients, whatever. So I'll do that, like generate, a couple $100 a month extra or whatever. But, you know, my income changes every year. So does my wife's, with inflation, cost of living raises, all that stuff. But for, to be fully transparent, I made probably about $115,000 last year. My wife made probably about 70 or 80, as we had her child. So, she was off for some time. But I would think it's safe to say our household income is about $200,000 a year, roughly. So like, we don't make FU money, like we're pretty blue collar family. We live within our means. We don't, not go do things. We go to concerts every summer. We go on vacations. It's not, anything crazy. But over time, I was really aggressive. Like I was telling you about that 457, I was putting about $600 to $700 a month in that account. And my wife works for a hospital, and they have a 401k. That's their only retirement. Um, Nurses make a lot of money hourly, but they don't have shit for retirement, if I'm being honest. At least in my case. So she would do about 12 to 15% of her income for 401k, and then the hospital matched up to 5%. So when we kind of got into real estate, I was like, you know what? Let's scale back on our stock market retirement investments. Let's go back down. Like I went back down to about $250 to $300 a month. And then my wife went to the match on our 401k. So she went to 5, and then the hospital contributes 5. And then the extra money, we did the calculations on. Mine's simple because it's a hard number. My wife's is a percentage. So we averaged her income, took that percentage, and said, okay, it's about, $300 to $400 every 2 weeks. And mine was about $200, $300 every 2 weeks. So we took the average of $500 every 2 weeks. So we're doing $1,000 a month. We're putting into real estate, whether it's saving for real estate to buy more real estate, or we're paying off principals on homes we own. So over time, I would say probably about 2 years worth. We saved, I have a freaking reminder on my phone that goes off every other Friday when I get paid, transfer $500 into real estate fund. So that way I have to actually go in there and do it, and I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I just manually do it because it makes sure that it goes in there, and then I have to go in and delete my reminder. So it's like, it triggers my brain to do it every single time. There's no room for error. So we did that for a couple of years, and we were able to save up. And then obviously, like I said, I get a bonus from the military every spring. So I take that and put it in there. And then, work as much overtime as possible. I'm a shift worker. So when extra shifts come on for me, it's time and a half, because I'm not a 40-hour week. Like I don't work, if I hit 40 hours, anything over that's overtime. Automatically, if a shift comes up, it's overtime regardless. So the sky is kind of the limit on how much you want to work. Now, it's not ideal to be at work for, 9 days in a row, because I work 24-hour shifts. So I try and pick up a few overtime shifts a month and take that money and put it into our real estate fund. And over time, we were able to save up. And, then it came down to like, okay, what's it going to cost for us to put down, and what are we comfortable with? So we wanted to stay about $20,000 to $25,000 down on a property for our first one. And comfortably enough, our price range was roughly between $100,000 to $200,000. We weren't really willing to go above that, just because we didn't know. Like, I don't know how this is all going to pan out. I think it's a safe bet. I don't think I'll lose a lot of money on it. I think I'll make money, but that's kind of where I was sitting as far as numbers go. So shopping around different lenders, understanding like what people require down. Some people require 20, 25, 15, 10, and then knowing their terms. Like, is it an ARM? Is it a 5-to-1? Is it a 7-to-1? Is it a 30-year? Is it a 15-year, 20-year, whatever it may be? And I shopped around probably 8 different banks in the Midwest or upper Midwest region, Minnesota, Wisconsin. And I ended up coming down, I think Compeer Financial is the bank. Sorry, I had a brain fart. I ended up going with them. They required 15% down for 30 years at a fixed rate. The difference between rates were less than a quarter of a percent. So I would have saved very, very little money per month by going with a shorter, like maybe a 15 or 20 year and having a larger payment, but saving a little bit more in interest, or, going with 15% down on a 30 year, keeping that payment affordable, keeping it low, knowing that I'm not going to hold on to it for 30 years. And if I do decide in 5 to 10 years and say, you know what, I think this is going to stay in the family until we die, I'll refi it into something smaller, or I'll get more aggressive on those payments. But for me, as an investment and a recreational property, I look at it as like, okay, I'm going to keep this low. The interest isn't going to pay out over 30 years because I'm not going to hold it for that long. So it made more sense for me to get into a 30-year mortgage at a low cost, which was 15% down, which was roughly about, I think after closing, it was about $22,000 we were able to put down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty interesting that you were able to, a lot of times, and it all changes, and I'm not a lender, but
Mhm.
the 5-year ARM rate versus the 30-year fixed rate between banks sometimes is a pretty big delta. And I'm
Sure.
sure that has to do with a lot of really funny, smart financial instruments that I do not understand. Which we're going to get a bank on here soon to talk about all of those different things. But do you have any real estate regrets yet? I mean, you're still, I don't want to say you're wet behind the ear because you have some experience and almost $1 million, to the bank. But
Yeah.
is there any mistakes or regrets that you've found already of, man, I've already learned this and I wish I would have done something differently?
Yeah, I definitely have a few. My first regret is I wish I didn't sell my first house. I wish I would have kept that. It was
And run
kind
it
of,
out.
yeah, it was in Minnesota. I live in Wisconsin now. But it was a cute little starter home. 3 bed, 1 bath, old farmhouse, over 100 years old. It was on 5 acres, kind of rural town. And at the time, I think I locked in at 4%, which was low at the time, but it got lower. That was in 2017. So yeah, my payment was like $900 a month, man. And I knew if I would have kept it, I could have rented it out for quite a bit more. And at the time, my wife and I weren't married, so what I could have done was sold it to her, put her name, and then we bought our forever home now. Um, but yeah, I wish I would have held that. I wish I would have been a little more educated on like how rent works, the demand of rentals. Um, but yeah, I mean that's a regret for sure. I was looking at the cash number, like, oh, I can make $40,000 and put it into, uh, something we've always wanted at our new home, whether it's appliances or like, we bought a home gym before home gyms were cool. Uh, just because we live so far from a gym, it just doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, just stuff we always wanted to do around the house that we didn't have at our old house. And I wish that was young Jeremy. Young Jeremy wanted the money now. Uh, but now looking back, I would have rather kept that house and rented it out. So that's a big regret of mine. I have zero regrets on the house we bought that I actually live in now. I think we got really lucky with it. Just no competing offers. It was kind of like hidden, not a lot of showings. And there were a couple things, a little hiccups when we bought it. It was all electric. Everything was electric. Heat, appliances were electric, like everything. And I think that might have scared some people when people pull the utilities and see like a monthly payment, like, oh, it costs $900 to heat this place a month. Well, I just flipped it to propane and we're good, like it's just little things like that. But I have zero regrets with this. Our next purchase was our duplex. That was I don't regret buying the structure. However, I regret the way I did it. It was a hot mark. Like at the time, the rates weren't good. Like the market was still good. Like people were still buying, investors specifically. But there were gosh, 5 to 7 offers on this duplex, and we were not the highest, but we had the best offer as far as we had no contingencies. We could close in 15 days if we wanted to, and I waived the inspection. And that was super risky of me because that was my first duplex, and I knew it would rent good because it was a 2 bed, 1 bath up down. So I knew I could make some money on it, but I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know any existing problems. And right away, man, uh, one unit was vacant, so I had to find a tenant for that. And as I was cleaning the place up, like, it was pretty clean. It came clean, but I just, me and my wife did some finishing touches on it. I opened the sink underneath. There's a bucket catching water that I didn't open during the walkthrough. I just didn't think about it. And I'm like, well, there's number one. Well, that leaky pipe led to the back side of that wall, which led into the bathroom, which was also leaking. So yeah, just like little things. And then I had a big deck project. It's a 2-story deck that was definitely shifting over time with our clay soil. When it gets hot and then it freezes and then thaws out, you could see the deck really shifting. I'm like, oh man, that needs to be addressed. So I call a couple contractors. Well, nothing against contractors, but in my area, if people don't want the work, they will just price it for more than like double. So my quotes on this deck were like $40,000 to replace this deck, and I got several opinions on this deck and ended up fixing it myself and saved some money, but lots of swear words and cussing and multiple trips to Menards, but we figured it out over time. But yeah, just
How much did it cost you to do it versus hiring it out?
I think I had about $300 in lumber. So not a lot. I mean, this guy, so the contractor wanted to tear the entire thing down and re-engineer everything and rebuild the whole thing, which it didn't need to be because the deck was tied into the trusses. It wasn't going anywhere. It just needed to be redone. The wood, I mean, they literally took whoever owned it years and years and years ago, they took tongue and groove and slapped it on the deck because I'm sure they were like, oh, we have all this flooring left over. Let's just put it on the deck and paint it. Well, over time, it's not treated to be outside. So just stuff cracked and faded and broke. So we just replaced all the lumber and replaced, we added strength to it by pouring concrete footers and putting in 6x6s, and they used to be 4x4s. So just like beefed it up. And that's what I wanted out of the contractor, was just different options rather than just like, I'm going to tear it down and rebuild, which may be the contracting world. I don't know. I'm not a contractor, but just like making sure that it's safe is the biggest concern of mine. So that was like, I wish I would have gotten an inspection done on that property. And my next duplex that I bought, I had an inspection. It was contingent on the inspection. So basically I had an out. If something came back and the sellers weren't able to negotiate it or fix it themselves professionally. And we had a laundry list of little things like outlets that didn't work, a couple shingles ripped off, chimney needed a little work, a lot of minute things, nothing major like red flags, like, oh my gosh, this needs to be, $50,000 worth of fixes. So I took that long list of inspection items and I gave it to the sellers and I said, fix all of this or we're out. And they did. They hired it all out and they sold it to us. So that one went good. So I would say, yeah, my long story short, Jake, my two biggest regrets is selling my first house and not getting an inspection on my first duplex and kind of just jumping into it and taking a lot of risk.
Yeah, I have a buddy. I'm sure he won't listen to this. So I'll tell the story. He's bought some multifamily. He's doing a really good job. And
Mhm.
there was one he bought for sale by owner, and the basement was buckling, and he was just like talking to the seller, so he didn't notice it. And then he bought it as is, no inspections, and it's a single family. I was like, dude, I wouldn't buy single families if you're just going to be doing rentals. Like
Mhm.
quads, duplexes, eightplexes, and he's like, "Yeah, that was really stupid." And so it's a standing joke because every property I've helped him find or buy has been knock on wood solid, and the one he did by himself, he's like, "I wish you were just there to be chatting to the seller so I could actually look around," because he does a lot of stuff with no inspections.
Yeah.
Um, so
It's
I
kind of have to, I mean, I don't want to say you have to, but I mean, it definitely weakens your offer nowadays, at least in this market up here. It's when you have multiple offers and you're not the highest and you have an inspection, you're probably going to get overlooked a lot.
Well, I think sellers are just conditioned that they know it's going to come back with a laundry list of repairs. And so I think if you're confident and comfortable, maybe yeah, it's probably a way to win something
Yeah.
for a little.
My
I mean,
biggest,
but inherent risk though.
our basements here are, we have very, like I said, clay soil. It freezes. We have a deep freeze every single year. We're, pretty much Canada, uh, but cooler.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it gets cold here, and if we don't get snow, which we haven't the last couple of years, like everything just it thaws out. And if we do get a lot of snow, all that moisture, if it's not graded away from your foundation, it can leak into these older homes. And that was a big thing. Like you can kind of tell when you walk into, and I'm not a professional. I don't do basements, but I can tell walking downstairs, like, okay, it's musty. This is definitely wet, or, it's a solid foundation. No musty smell. You can see, you walk around the exterior, look at the cracks, any shifting, any major signs. And then obviously like over time, some homeowners, they'll do improvements like structural stability, having beams put in and whatnot. So that was my biggest thing, was like making sure the basement is foundationally secure and doesn't need a $20 to $30,000 fix.
Your buddy who's a really successful real estate agent, when you said you were going to buy land, what was his reaction to that? He's like, "Oh man, let's do that," or he's like, "Dude, that's stupid."
Yeah, it was a tough conversation, man. I actually didn't use him to buy my land. And the reason being is because he is very, very smart in residential and commercial and even property that's buildable, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, he knows, utilities at the road, electricity, water, can we get a well done, whatever. He's really good at all that. But he's not a hunter. He's not a whitetail hunter. And I'm buying land to hunt, not to build on and not to purely invest in. So, me being, I'm a type A guy, I'm a planner. I like to network. I like to get a lot of opinions and kind of form my own. Um, so I like to have a different set of eyes, and nothing against listing agents on properties, but I like to have a different opinion than just theirs because they're selling it. I mean, and there's a lot of good agents, but there's also a handful of bad agents. So my buddy, this is a different buddy. He's a licensed agent in Wisconsin, but he also does habitat consulting. So like somebody that doesn't know what that is, a Jeff Sturgis. Bring him out. They walk your property, they make a plan, and you implement that plan. And then you can hire him to do the work, or you can do it yourself. He encourages you to do it yourself so you can learn and all that, and he'll straight up tell you, which most people probably will, is that it's expensive to hire all that out. It's a lot of hours depending on what you're doing. So I used him because he's been doing it for 20 plus years. He's been to a lot of properties all over the Midwest. And the problem was, though, he was about 4.5 hours from my house. Is his kind of home region there. So I didn't want to bring him up like on every property. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I would reach out to listing agents if I wanted to go walk a property, and I would disclose like, hey, I have an agent, I have a buyer agreement in place. Would you prefer that agent to be there? Can I walk it with you, or you be there while I'm walking it? Or can I just go walk it? And I had a lot of mixed reviews. Like some agents were like, yeah, dude, go ahead. I don't care. Just let me know when you want to go. Some agents were like, I want to be there. Or some agents were like, your agent has to be here. And I felt bad. I mean, obviously I was paying my buddy a commission to represent me. But I also was like, if I don't truly believe in this property on what I see of it, or maybe I drive by it, I'm not going to ask him to drive 4 hours to meet me on these different properties. Or like, if I was looking 2 hours south, he'd have to drive 2 hours. And it's just, I didn't want to waste his time because I understand that time is money and time is very valuable. Even though he represents me, I understand that he works for me, but I also respect him as a person and as a friend, and I respect his time. So what I would do is I'd go scout these properties out, kind of like pre-scout, like, is it worth him coming up and looking at with me and writing on, or is it kind of like a dud? Like, I'm not really interested. Not a good deer neighborhood. Not what I thought it was, whatever. So I did that. And then, I really, really liked the piece I bought. I think it had a lot of potential. It was a blank slate. And so I called him. I said, Josh, I think you need to come up north. And he drove up there. We walked it. He was taking notes on his Onyx and kind of developing a plan. And then we wrote on it and, done deal. And now he's coming back up, I think in like 20 days, and we're going to hammer out travel corridors with his equipment. And we're going to collaborate kind of his brand and ours and we're doing a farm series on YouTube.
Nice.
And yeah, we're going to help promote his brand and we're just going to have a fun day up here. So
that's super exciting. And you already answered this question, but it doesn't sound like this will be your last farm. This is kind of like I think the proving ground, buying a farm you can afford and figuring out, you think you know what you want. And I feel like once you buy your first farm, you really realize what is really important. Maybe what's not as important as what you thought. And I mean, about every single person on this thing is like, you just got to get in the game, which I feel like Bill Winke is probably the one that truly coined that phrase. We did a podcast with him a long time ago, and he's, you just got to get in the game. I think he had a blog series about his whole land journey as well, and I think that was in there too. I'm drawing from a memory, which is a scary thought, but so I think that's really awesome that you guys are going to do basically the full, I guess, renovation, if you will.
yeah, man, I think like it just makes you learn too, like deer, like I
Yeah.
personally, I think, and maybe people disagree, but I think it's a lot more work if you're willing to do all the habitat work and make it the best deer hunting you possibly can on your private land than it is to go hunt public land. I am way more aggressive on public land. I don't care. I don't want to say I don't care. I care less if I spook a deer or two or I spook a buck because I can go hunt other deer versus private. I'm a lot more cautious. It's a lot more time putting in all these, getting your access dialed, putting in food plots, maintaining your stands, maintaining trails. Like it's a lot of time. And that was kind of the thing. Like I said, I'm a type A. I like to get projects done quickly. I don't like to sit on projects. And that's going to be kind of the tough part for me is like not stressing about it. I think if I start stressing about getting, food in or
Everyone stresses about it, man.
it,
Everyone.
make it, it's like you gotta, get what you can done. Don't sacrifice time with your family. Bring them out there, have them do a couple things with you. And then, it's all about balance. And I think that's the hardest part is balancing your family time and also getting your chores done on your property to make it what you want. But yeah, just utilizing your time, man. Just doing, like today, I'm going to go flag out all my trails today. It'll probably take me all day, but I know if I have those flagged, they're going to be straight and they're going to go the direction I want versus relying, my equipment operator's GPS. And then now we got a maze, but,
Yeah.
and it just moving. I say shoot for the ribbon and he shoots for that ribbon and he gets what he can and it keeps him moving where I can get the best bang for my buck with the hours allowed.
Yeah, 100%. Last question. Onyx is the title sponsor here of the Land Podcast. What is your favorite feature of Onyx that maybe not a lot of people use or know?
I think so far lately, my favorite has been just designing like this property I pulled up on my Onyx. It's obviously I have no pins on it. And when I first walked it, I tracked on it. So you can run the tracking app and it'll show you your routes and whatnot. And I everything I marked like, oh, there's a rub here. There was a scrape here. This is a potential food source, whatever it may be. I'd add all those waypoints and then I'd make a folder and put it in the river farm, it's called. So I'd make a river farm folder and I'd put all that in there. And then that way, like when I pull up the design of the property, I'm using I believe it's called the area shape tool where you can mark out like a food plot and it'll tell you the acreage. Or what I utilize a lot is the line, like the direct line tool where you can just drop dots and it eventually makes you a line. And that's kind of how I drew out my property. So my access pretty much borders the entire property, the perimeter. but I had to use that range finding tool, which is another great tool that I think it was 8 yards from the border. So I gave myself about 15 to 20 feet of buffer just in case, like, I'm not going to cut trails right on the property line,
Yeah.
because I think if I remember correctly, surveyors, their tools they use, the lasers or whatever, are different than like the true north magnets, like a compass. So yeah, I like that. Just drawing them out, color coding them, and then like walking, like if you walk a perimeter of a food plot and you're like, oh, this is going to be the food plot, you can draw that out with the line tool on top of that tracker, or you can change the tracking color and all that. Just all the like the tracking, the rangefinder tool's nice, but I really like just color coding everything. Like, you know, uh, red is a blind, so I'm going to keep my blinds red and my stands yellow, or like my access trail is going to be brown, my food plots are going to be green, switchgrass is going to be yellow, whatever it may be. I can just really organize that, and then my little pins that I pre-scouted are all in a different folder, so it's not just combobulated
Cluttered.
all.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think Onyx is such a powerful tool, and I think it gets even more powerful and more fun when you're designing something and you
Yeah,
can do
dude.
all those different things.
Yeah, and I've tried other apps, just to see like if I could get better imagery or different waypoints and stuff. And I am so conditioned to Onyx. I've never gone away from it because I can't. Like I know how to use it. It all makes sense to me. It has everything I want on it. And imagine if you took all your waypoints, and it can be done, but it's a pain in the butt. All your waypoints you own on Onyx and transferring them to another app. It would take so long to organize it all. It's all on one platform. I think it's very affordable.
Yeah.
Um, there's so many. I mean, even if you were, you weren't sure if you wanted the elite membership and you wanted to test it out. There's so many people that have codes, and they give out codes where you can try it for, 30 days or 7 days, whatever it may be, and see if it's for you. Or maybe you just hunt one state. It's super affordable, and I think it's a must have. Like if you're especially a public land guy, or you're hunting borders of private and public, like that's big for me when I go out west. Is if I'm hunting elk in an area where there's private land and there's forest or BLM, like I need to give myself a buffer. If I shoot a bull, I need to be like within 200 yards of property lines, because that bull may run and then I might not be able to recover him. So
Mhm.
I think it's a no brainer, man.
Well, cool, man. Well, I really appreciate your transparency and sharing your story and everything else. Really enjoyed it. And so, if people want to follow along on that series as it goes live, where can they do that?
Yeah. So our brand is called Whitetail DNA. We have a team there of 5 guys. Yes, 5. Don't get my brain shut off there. We have Alex, who is the founder of Whitetail DNA. Garrett, Luke, myself, we're all up here in northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, and then our other team member Caleb, he's down in Nebraska. We run a YouTube channel and the Instagram page. If you want to follow on my personal journey, mine is Jerlopy7, JERLOPY7. That's my personal Instagram. But yeah, the farm series will be on YouTube on the Whitetail DNA page. Just basically walking people through like what we're doing. We don't claim to be experts at land management. We're basically showing you what we believe in and different things we're trying. It may work, it may not work. We're gonna test different things out, like what food is doing well, what food grew really well in the soil that we have. Our first video is going to be on like just testing soil, how to do that, how simple it is. And yeah, it's just going to be a cool little series, and hopefully help somebody relate. I know, like, you mentioned Bill, like his stuff is awesome to watch. I really enjoy watching him progress his new farm, or like the Midwest whitetail guys talk about their farms, but I can't relate to that. I don't live in Iowa. I don't own the acres they have. So maybe we're trying to bring like a little blue collarness to the YouTube. So
I like it. I like it. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to following along.
absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. That was fun.